Okay, let's start. Let's kick off. The members of Codex, the members of ISDI, their colleagues, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining us today at our webinar dedicated to the revised standard on follow-up formula for older infants and the product for young children. It's a Codex standard 156 from 1987. I am Jean-Christophe Kremer. I'm the Secretary General of ISDI, and I will moderate today's session. I'm accompanied here with my communication manager, Hugh Longton, who is helping to ensure that the webinar runs smoothly from a technical point of view. If you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A button. I also extend a particular welcome to the Codex members present today. Due to the time zone constraints, some colleagues, particularly in Latin America, cannot join us live, but therefore this session is being recorded. We will share the link to the recording as well as the presentation that you will see today and all relevant information after this session. We have had many registrations, which shows a strong interest in the topic. It also feels good to have a wide representation from all regions. So today, we have the privilege and also the honor to have with us Steve Weirn. Steve is the chair of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and he kindly accepted our invitation to welcome you today and provide some opening remarks. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jean-Christophe, and my thanks to ISDI for the introduction and for the invitation. As you say, to give some opening comments in this webinar on understanding and implementing the new Codex standards for follow-up formula and the launch of the new ISDI guidance. As many of you will know, I'm coming to the end of my term as chairperson of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and so I've been reflecting on my time as chair and before that as vice chair. And I've tried to make my own contribution to making a reality of the Codex vision, and in particular, that part of it that talks about Codex being where the world comes together. And that's not just about bringing together our 188 member countries and one member organization, although believe me, that's often hard enough. It's also about recognizing the value that's added by our 240 plus observer organizations, including ISDI. And this has hopefully been one defining characteristic of my time as Codex chairperson, reaching out to our observers. And I'm pleased that as part of its development of a draft for the Codex strategic plan for the next period for 2026 to 31, our executive committee last week agreed that one of our new strategic goals should be to strengthen relationships with relevant international organizations, promoting an integrated approach to address global challenges. And I've set out previously how ISDI and other observers can realise your role in Codex. You can engage with national Codex committees to inform national positions. You can use your technical expertise and insight in your sector by helping us to spot new issues before they become trade concerns. And you can contribute to the development of standards that work in the settings and sectors in which you operate. And critically, you can partner with us, as today, in the ever-growing use of Codex standards. And that's why I'd like to congratulate ISDI on taking the initiative to develop the guidance being launched today, because we all share the responsibility for maximising the impact of Codex by increasing the visibility and use of our standards. And I can think of no better example of a Codex observer organisation taking a lead in fulfilling this shared responsibility. So turning to the standard itself, it relates to the composition criteria for these products and also to their labelling. And I understand that today we'll be focusing on the formula, that's on the former. And there are significant differences between the Codex standard for follow-up formula initially adopted in 1987 and the revised standard we adopted just last year. As the new ISDI guidance makes clear, ISDI has provided technical input throughout the extensive and inclusive process of revision, and my thanks to you and your members for that. And as a result, this revision of the existing standard has provided, in the words of ISDI, a global upgrade of these products, that reflects the most current science. So we'll hear in this seminar about the changes from the previous standard and the clear differentiation there now is between criteria for follow-up formula for infants aged 6 to 12 months and the product for young children aged 12 to 36 months. And critically, today's webinar will also focus on recommendations from ISDE on implementation of the revised standard into national regulatory frameworks, highlighting some of the choices that national regulatory authorities will need to make. So my thanks again to ISDE for playing this significant role in advocating for and supporting implementation of the revised Codex standard. Thanks, and back to you, Jean-Christophe.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for your kind words and kind remarks. I also want to congratulate you and thank you for your dedication to lead Codex over the past few years as chair, and dare I say you were leading by example. So I'm sure we'll meet soon. And now I suppose we can start going back to the presentation and this, yeah. And there's I hope you can see my screen. And I would like to have it, yes. So with this, just for the Codex members, a recap of who we are. And we are the International Federation of and the Global Expert Association representing the special dietary foods. So beyond infant and young child nutrition, we also cover other food sectors like FSMPs, foods for special medical purposes, also dietetic nutrition, gluten-free food, and sports food. And our members are, as ISDE is a federation, we are, our members are national associations a bit everywhere in the world. Not as many countries are members of ISDE, but we are also, as I sometimes say, a mini Codex on our own. And before we are shaping our industry position, and that will be echoed in a Codex meeting, we are collating all the information from our countries before we get there. So, but enough of that. Let's go to the order of the day. And summarizing 10 years of multilateral negotiations to shape to the standard that we have today in 30 minutes is a challenge. So we have to make a few choices. And we have decided to focus today on the composition criteria of the two product groups, follow-up formula for older infants and the product for young children. So, as I said, we are aware that you may have also a lot of questions, and we will also then focus on implementing the standard, what it means concretely in the countries. So we are aware that there will be more questions. We will want to take some time for questions and answers. You can, our panelists will help us to respond to them. And if we don't have time and we have more questions, I commit that we will answer them by email to you. So let me introduce you to our panel today. I have Xavier Lavigne, Marie-France Pageret, Violeta Jeszuk-Brozowska, and Ray de Vergillis. All of them are members of ISDE. Xavier is also vice president of ISDE, but they have been driving also the positioning of our and provided technical expertise that we have echoed in CCNFSDU when developing the standard. So Xavier will start, and he will give us a general overview of the major changes of the revised standard. Xavier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe, and good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone. The new standard establishes indeed fundamental changes. And if we can go to the next slide, ISDE guidance is a tool that can help navigate those changes and better understand the standard. It provides also the interpretation of ISDE on several aspects. As highlighted by Steve, we have now two new products, actually, and the roles and definitions of these products have been adapted accordingly. Many of the visuals that you will see in these presentations are taken from the ISDE guidance, and help to summarize or understand at a glance the fundamental changes that we are facing. So in that slide, for example, in orange, you have the elements from the old standard. In blue, the elements from the follow-up formula for older infant 6 to 12. And in green, the products for young children 12 to 36. So what you can see directly is that the energy has been decreased, the protein have been decreased, the fat have been adjusted. More importantly, maximum levels have been established for carbohydrates. And this is a first and very important because generally, traditionally in Codex standards, between the calories and the macronutrients, the carbohydrates were always the variable, the factor that was used to adjust and balance the formula. In the new system, all the macronutrients are limited, so the protein, the fat, and the carbohydrates, plus the energy. This is fundamental because also, very importantly, all these elements need to be balanced because for the same energy level, if you decrease one of the macro, you will need to increase another one, meaning that if you decrease the carbohydrates level, you will need to increase either the fats or the protein in order to get the same level of energy. Regarding the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, in the follow-up formula for older infants, you have 25 mandatory nutrients, micronutrients. In the products for young children, you only have 8 mandatory micronutrients, which leads to a flexibility and a differentiation in these products for young children that are decided by the formulation put forward by the manufacturers. If we go to next slide, it is important to flag that we have a clear distinction between the two products, between part A for products for follow-up formula for older infants and part B for products for young children. But still, we have a complex and strong relationship between the two parts. So if you look at part A, follow-up formula for older infants, you have 25 mandatory micronutrients plus optional ingredients. If you look at part B, product for young children, you have 8 mandatory nutrients. Then you have 17, and that's the column in blue, optional nutrients. Those are the nutrients that can be the same as in part A, sorry. So if you have the same nutrients, then you need to have the same levels, meaning that if you are using in products for young children, a nutrient that is in the essential composition of the follow-up formula for older infant, these nutrients need to be at the same level. And then again, for products for young children, you also have the optional ingredients, which are a key concept for both of the products. This concept of optional ingredients is embedded in requirements which are demonstrated safety and suitability of the ingredient or sufficient amount to achieve the effects. And our colleague Violeta will now go through the follow-up formula for older infant, the section A for 6 to 12 months, and dig further into this section of the standard.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So let's start firstly with what is this product for? You could see already that the biggest change was that this product has been defined as a breast milk substitute. So follow-up formula for older infants, it is product which is manufactured for use as a breast milk substitute for older infants. And older infants, we mean infants from 6 to 12 months of age, which is introduced still, it is a liquid part of the diet, principal element, because at that stage, infants are still relying on the liquid diet, when we know already that they are moving to complementary food. So follow-up formula at that moment, it is not serving as a sole source of nutrition, and this is very important to keep in mind. Now, you have essential composition established, and this essential composition you can find in the part A. Essential composition cover macronutrients and micronutrients. In addition to essential composition, in order to allow, of course, use scientific advances and support innovation, we can use optional ingredients. I will right now zoom into essential composition and highlight key changes which were made compared to the former standards. The first big change is we see protein. Protein level has been reduced compared to the former level. And the level has been reduced from minimum amount of 3 gram per 100 kcal to 1.8 gram to 100 kcal. The reason for that change is that new reference was used based upon WHO and FAO guidelines from 2007. Here, I would like to also mention that Codex allows to go even lower with protein content, meaning the content between 1.6 to 1.8 is also permitted. And this is left to the national authority to decide whether this amount of protein is appropriate for the nutritional needs of the target population in that country. Another change you could see already is, of course, lipids. You may see that lipids level have been increased. And the reason for lipids or quality of lipids is based on the survey, global survey, which were done by scientists and by nutritionists. We find out that quality of lipids in the diet of older infants is not sufficient. For this reason, fats has been adjusted and fatty acid has been included as well. In terms of carbohydrates, we have new requirements completely. We have minimum established and maximum established. As Xavier mentioned, that was not the case before. And the new minimum is 9 gram per 100 kcal up to 14 gram per 100 kcal. In addition, we have also sources of carbohydrates specified. So lactose and glucose polymers are preferred sources of carbohydrates. Now, in addition, if you would like to use starches, only pre-cooked and gelatinized starches are permitted, of course, gluten-free. Sucrose and fructose shall not be used or should not be used unless they are needed as a source of carbohydrates. But in that case, they cannot exceed 20% of available carbohydrates. So if I would like, and other elements like vitamins, minerals are also established. I have another slide on that, and I will focus in a second. What I would like to mention as well, that many aspects have been left to national authorities. As I already mentioned, protein is one of them. Second element is copper level. And why copper level is left? Because in different regions, you may have different amount of copper in the water. There are also optional ingredients like total nucleotides or L-carnitine or even DHA, when national authorities may decide which elements, which levels to be established. With regards to DHA, it is concluded that it can be optionally added. Yes, there is a need to add DHA from nutritional point of view. However, if it is added, then we have additional condition. We add DHA at the minimum amount of 20 milligram. Then we have to also include arachidonic acid in the ratio 1:1. And because DHA and arachidonic acid are part of LC-PUFA may also contain EPA fatty acid. Then this EPA amount should never exceed DHA amount. In terms of optional ingredients, I would like to reiterate what Xavier did mention. To support scientific advancement and innovation and cover nutritional needs of older infants, yes, optional ingredients are permitted. We have two types of optional ingredients. One type of optional ingredients is specified in the standards. It is not closed list, but it is mentioned that certain nutrients may be added, and then you have minimum included. And there is open list of optional ingredients, which setting up a principle. And principle is that these ingredients should always be safe and suitable for that target population. And in addition, the amount added in the product should, of course, create intended benefit. Additionally, very important change is that for the first time in this standard, flavorings cannot be added into the product. And the reason being is that you could see already that follow-up formula 612 has been defined as a breast milk substitute. If you can go to the next slide, please. The same situation you could see already for follow-up formula for older infants in terms of vitamins and minerals. You could see many changes, and the reason being is that, of course, the former standards was based on the science available before 2017. Now the committee have looked at recent survey data, nutritional needs of the target population. And there were already many, at global level, we have seen that the population in young, older infants are lacking iron, but also good quality of fat and fatty acid. Other differences were based mostly on the regional differences. However, Codex did propose amendments in many nutrients. I will focus on vitamin A. As you could see, this level of vitamin A has been reduced, and it has been reduced because too much of vitamin A is not seen as a good value. And as you could see, we resulted from 225 microgram expressed as retinol equivalent to 180 microgram, as retinol per 100 kcal. In addition, you could also see that we introduced sodium as well. And sodium is an important element, but sodium is also established for the first time with maximum level. And even other sources of vitamins and minerals cannot bring more sodium than it is established in the standards. For other nutrients, we have introduced new niacin, manganese, selenium, and copper, because to satisfy nutritional requirements of older infants, these are also critical micronutrients. And all others vitamins and minerals, for the first time, has also established upper level. It is a guidance upper level, not a maximum level at that stage yet. With this, I would like to move to my colleague Ray.
Thank you, Violetta. Now I'm going to move us on to Part B of the standard, product for young children, which includes children 12 to 36 months of age. We've heard some of the distinctive differences between Parts A, the follow-up formula for older infants, and Part B, products for young children, related to essential composition and optional ingredients of these two parts of the standard. In discussing Part B, product for young children, I'm going to note a number of aspects of the standard that have been left open to national authorities to further legislate and how that impacts some of the interpretation of the standard. In comparing and reviewing the differences between these two parts of the standard is absolutely critical to recognize and note that Part B, product for young children, is formulated to serve as a complementary or supplementary liquid to the diet. Based on the composition outlined in the standard, it cannot serve as a sole source of nutrition for this population. The standard recognizes the role of product for young children by the fact that the standard does not define follow-up formula for young children as a breast milk substitute. Not defining this product as a breast milk substitute is supported by the fact that there are only 8 mandatory micronutrients in this product, making it a product to be used as part of a complementary feeding pattern. However, as stated in a footnote in this section, there are some countries that choose to regulate these products as a breast milk substitute, even though the standard makes clear that this product cannot satisfy nutritional requirements of young children on its own, which would be expected by a breast milk substitute. Another example in which aspects of the standard are left open to national authorities includes the section in the standard on carbohydrates. ISD strongly supports the maximum level of mono and disaccharides other than lactose of 2.5 grams per 100 kcals outlined in the standard, as this is in line with WHO guidelines that sugars should account for no more than 10% of total energy. However, the footnote of this section, footnote 5, states that national authorities may limit this level further to 1.25 grams per 100 kcals. This level is based on a conditional recommendation from WHO. It should be noted that this conditional recommendation from WHO is related to the entire diet, while follow-up formula for young children, that product is only for one part of a young child's diversified diet. Additionally, further restricting the specification of mono and disaccharides will lead to changes needed in other macronutrients to meet necessary energy requirements, as previously illustrated by Xavier. Also within the carbohydrate section of Part B of the standard is language in footnote 4 stating that for products based on non-milk protein, carbohydrate sources that have no contribution to sweet taste should be preferred and in no case be sweeter than lactose. Discussions on this provision at both CCNFSDU and the Codex Committee on Methods of Analysis and Sampling continue. ISD strongly supports the concept that lactose be the preferred carbohydrate in products based on milk protein, and we agree that sucrose and fructose should not be added to these products, regardless of the protein source. However, ISD also points out that the Codex Committee on Methods of Analysis and Sampling has informed the CCNFSDU committee that there are no known validated methods to measure sweetness of carbohydrate sources, therefore making it impossible to determine compliance of such a provision, a position that's also been shared by AOACA International. Additionally, it's important to note that this product is already greatly restricted when it comes to imparting sweetness. There are no artificial or high-intensity sweeteners permitted in this product, and while there is no scientific substantiation to restrict flavorings, only 4 flavors are permitted in use of this product, and these flavors are used for reasons of palatability only and do not impart a sweet taste. Therefore, ISD calls on countries to be pragmatic in order to ensure compliance when implementing the standard at the national level. To further review Part B, I'm going to pass this on to my colleague, Marie-France.
Many thanks, Ray, and hi, everybody. So, as said by Xavier previously, if you look at the micronutrients now for this product, less are mandatory. We said already that we have only 5 vitamins and 3 minerals that have been identified for that due to the need of the target population. Important to note in this case that the specific case of the vitamin D. For this one, a footnote was added in the standard to explain that competent authorities may deviate from the condition as appropriate to take into account the nutritional needs of the country's populations. Indeed, the absorption of the part of vitamin D coming from the sun's exposure may differ depending on the countries, reason why we can adapt the levels of this vitamin as required. Now, in addition to this mandatory list of nutrients, authorities may decide to add mandatory requirements for other nutrients. In this case, they will have to use the Part A for follow-on formula for older infants that was previously described to choose the nutrient. The levels for them side may be modified if the nutritional needs of the local population required some changes and can take into account the inherent quantity of nutrient in cow's milk. The deviations should then be based on scientific data, risk assessment, intake level surveys, informing the scientific needs for such a deviation. Otherwise, the criteria that were previously presented will have to be followed. Other optional ingredients, such as the one from follow-on formula for older infants that were presented for the Part A previously, and others can be used as well. In this case, they have to be safe and suitable, and their levels should be based on sufficient amounts to achieve the intended effect. And this has to be determined by the manufacturers that should be able to justify these levels. You can see in the green part of the table, taurine, DHA, and arachidonic acid, choline, inositols. They are optional ingredients in the follow-on formula part that was described previously with defined criteria. However, They are not part of what is called the essential composition of the Part A, so therefore the requirements, including minimums, maximum, upper limits described in Part A, do not apply to this ingredient when they are used for product for young children for the Part B. So that's the difference compared to the Part A. And if we take the example of DHA, the requirement for the addition of arachidonic acid, at least at the same levels of DHA from Part A, that was explained previously by Violetta, does not apply to product for young children. So in this case, for product for young children, it is not mandatory to add ARA in case of DHA addition. And for the level of this optional ingredient, they need to be determined following the principle established in 3.2.2 Part B, meaning that the product need to have sufficient amounts of this optional ingredient to achieve the intended effect for young children. This will have to be defined on a case-by-case basis by the manufacturers. And for example, the addition of arachidonic acid when DHA is added is not mandatory, as I said previously. But if ARA is added, the level needs to be defined by the manufacturer to be able to achieve with the product the intended effect. This is in line with the science-based flexibility intended by Codex. Last point I would like to highlight here for this product is that compared to the Part A, for this product, some flavorings are permitted. The list of permitted ones is the same as the ones from the old standard, with only one change, the way the maximum limits are expressed for ethyl vanillin and vanillin to align with the standardized maximum limits expression for flavors was modified. These flavorings are permitted as young children are exposed to many flavorings and tastes at this age as they are moving to family foods, and therefore there was no need to limit the use of flavoring for these age groups compared to what was done for the Part A for 6 to 12 months. With that, we gave you a high-level overview of the composition of follow-on formula for older infants and drink for young children. And now, Xavier will present some points about the implementations of the standard.
Thank you, Marie-France. And if we can move to the next slide, as we have seen, we have major changes in the global standards for both products and for Part A and Part B. And this calls, therefore, for a smooth implementation and transition. It is very important to remember that these products are standardized at Codex Alimentarius because they are traded at global level. If we can move to next slide, I just wanted to highlight a few of the practical recommendations that ESD is making in those guidance, among which minimum transition period of 36 months for the implementation of the new standard. Clear communication, that is a necessity, but also ensuring that the exhaustion of stocks and the end of shelf life of products that are on the market are reflected in the transition. It's also key to reflect and provide flexibility to manufacturers, the permission for companies to put products on the market that are compliant with the new regulation prior to the mandated compliance date. It is key to understand that the countries will implement these new standards at different speeds. And some products that are developed by manufacturers are shared by different countries, and some manufacturing sites provide products to different countries. So as manufacturers need to adapt to the new national requirement, they also need to keep in mind the global picture of the developments of the implementation of these standards. So really, ESD calls on national authorities to consult with national associations, the ESD members, before and when implementing the new Codex standard in order to ensure a smooth transition period. If we then go to next slide, just to understand why we are suggesting this general transition period of 36 months. When you are looking at a new formulation, it's a minimum of 13 months in order to ensure compliance with the new requirements, the analysis, the calculations and testing that are needed, plus the new requirements that might be necessary. You need then to look into ensuring the compliance and stability of the product's trials. And this can take a minimum of 12 months. And then at the end, you also need to consider the administrative steps. These can change from one country to another, but generally speaking, the administrative processes can take up to 18 months in order for the products to get on the market. So that's why, in a nutshell, we would recommend this transition period of at least 36 months. And this is to avoid market disturbance in terms of supply, but also long-term compliance with the new requirements in the standard. It's key to cover the exhaustions of stocks of products that are on the market currently, and also the possibility for products to coexist for a while for the very same reason. And it's important to note that transition periods are recognized by many jurisdictions, and they are a very important point to give visibility for manufacturers in order to adapt to the new requirements of the standards. And now I can give the follow-up back, I think, to Jean-Christophe.
Thank you, Xavier, and thank you for all the panelists, Marie-France, Ray, Violetta, to guide us through and give us a high overview of the changes. So with this, I mean, we have prepared this guidelines, which are now on our website. You can download them easily, and you will see that it's quite easy to understand. I think it's primarily designed for the manufacturers, but of course, regulators may also find it easy to understand what the implications are, as we have outlined here today. So there's also a particular paper on the transition period, and also explaining what Xavier just highlighted now around the transition period and our proposed approach to do this smoothly in a coordinated manner to avoid disturbance for access to the products. I think we are quite in time for some questions and answers. That can be asked to the panel. We got a few questions and answers already in the Q&A. So if members and participants still have questions, please do write them, and we'll be able to address them. There was indeed a question whether there was a question from a Codex member, I believe, to Steve, particularly whether Codex has guidance or can explain how member states can implement new or revised Codex standards. And Steve has already answered that by saying that it's an interesting recurrent question, but normally implementation and timelines and schedules are a matter of the national regulatory authorities. So it is helpful here for us to get some interest and some guidance from our side, how we as industry also see that we can provide the products complying with the new standard, that this cannot be done in a fortnight. We have seen that, okay, there's a role for us to reformulate. We've seen strong reformulations with many changes, both at micro and micronutrient level. But then there are some administrative steps as well. There are impacts on the labels, which we haven't really touched upon today, but that requires our transitions. There's a question, I believe, for one of our panelists. I don't know who is able to take that question, where there's also, I think, a Codex member asking whether natural fruit extracts, like, for instance, monk fruit extracts, are permitted. However, it's prohibited to impart sweetness. So how do we look at this? Can let's say, for instance, here a monk fruit extract be accepted in or permitted in the product for young children? Any of the panelists willing to answer that question?
I'm happy to maybe give it a start on that specific question. So just to flag that indeed the general requirements of not adding an ingredient that imparts sweetness is applicable overbroad. It's important to flag that the flavors that are allowed, including the extracts, are generally not used for a sweetness purpose at all. They are actually acting on receptors from a sensory point of view that are much more linked to palatability aspects, and it's generally linked to the levels of vitamins and minerals that we have also in the product. So definitely not from a sweetness point of view, and that's why this is still a possibility to maintain those flavors, and we really support as easy to maintain the authorization of these flavors for products for young children. As highlighted also by Marie-France, it's at a stage of development of children that are exposed to many products. The diet is completely diversified at this stage, so there is no real rationale for not supporting the use of the few flavors, and they are quite limited, that are allowed in this standard.
Thank you, Xavier. I see other questions coming in, so thanks for those. There is a double question here on the section B, product for young children, and I think Marie-France has touched upon that one. Is it mandatory to include ARA when you add DHA in the product? So that's one of the questions.
So I can explain again. In fact, in the Codex standard for the part A, you have what is called essential composition, and in the part B for the different nutrients, they refer to this essential composition aspect. And for that, you need to look at the part A. However, this is for nutrient, and DHA is not in the list of essential composition, meaning that the requirement including, as I said, minimum, maximum, and upper limit that will be described in part A for this ingredient will not apply to this ingredient because it will be used for the product for part B, where there will not be any reference for the part A. So it will not be mandatory to add arachidonic acid in case you will add DHA in your product. And if you decide to do so and to add arachidonic acid, then for the levels, you will have to determine the right level to be sure that you will have enough levels of ARA to achieve the intending effects for young children in the product that you will have. So it's completely different compared to what we have as a requirement for ARA and DHA for part A.
Thank you, Marie-France. I hope this helps. And we have other questions. Yeah, so there's a question here on section, I believe this is around section B. So when the protein level is below 3 grams per 100 kcal, can we consider the upper limit for carbohydrates then to be at 14 grams kcal, even without a specific authorization from the authorities? Because it seems that the 12.5 maximum cannot be reached with a lower protein content. Could you clarify this? One of the panelists?
So I will take it, Jean-Christophe.
Yes.
So yes, what is stated in the Codex standard that indeed, when the protein level is lowered, you may go for carbohydrates level up to 14 grams per 100 kcal. And how to justify to authorities is to really make a calculation and show that if you lower protein level and you have also low sugar level, you would need to have very high level of fat, for example, 4% or 4.5%. In that situation, we know no child would be able to drink that product. So we have to remember that in order to comply with energy requirement, 3 macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fat play a role. And all have to be in balance. So once we go for low protein level and low carbohydrates, or in that case, we go for low protein level and amount of fat permitted in the standards, you have to go for higher level of carbohydrates. Now, if you look at the footnote, it is stated that it has to be, may be permitted by competent national and or regional authorities. So therefore, solid justification have to be submitted to the authorities for that request. But it is technically required to go up to 14 grams. And this is the reason why this footnote exists in Codex standard.
Okay, thanks, Violetta. That's clear. There's another question here on optional ingredients, I see. What if the countries or the local competent authority does not have any specific requirement? How does it work then for section B, for instance? One of the panelists.
I think generally
Explain.
speaking, Marie-France, you can go ahead if you want. Generally speaking, and maybe you can complete, optional ingredients, as we said, it's a key concept in the Codex framework, and you have criteria and requirements for those, safety and suitability, and then the amounts of the optional ingredients versus the effect intended. Those are key principles that should come forward and that are embedded in the Codex system. So as long as a country is a member of Codex, this is something that is generally recognized. It's key to highlight that this approach and the fact that you do not have negative list at Codex, etc., it's because you need to ensure also the capacity of innovation and evolutions of the products. And it takes time for a Codex standard to be modified, so we need that flexibility. I mean, these standards took 10 years, 12 years of discussion before modification. So we need to have that level of flexibility. So at local level, national level, I think that's an important aspect to always highlight if that's not already recognized in the national systems.
Thank you, Xavier. There's still a bit of time for more questions. We can still have 5 minutes. There is a question, interesting one here also. Is it still possible to develop a follow-on formula? So I suppose 6 to 12 months of follow-up formula for older infants from going to the full age range, like until 36 months, based on part A. So imagine, the way I understand the question would be then, okay, you have a product which complies to part A. Is it also applicable for the age group 12 to 36 months?
I would say that we need to be sure that the criteria that we have in part B will be as well compliant with that. To be able to have this kind of things. Now it's not really the way the new Codex standard was built, because it was decided to have 2 different products, one from 6 to 12 months and one for 1 year to 3 years. But yeah.
And I guess on that one, you would have to see what is the local implementation, but just to flag that, and we did not cover, but you have also labeling requirements, and the age range of the product is an important aspect to reflect upon on the labeling section. So, I mean, you also need to have that consideration beyond the formulation.
And in addition, if I may, the reason Codex established 2 groups and different nutritional requirements are because they are different. Yes, so we should also not over-fortify the diet of young children with excessive amount of fortified vitamins and minerals. That was a reason the Codex put a distinctive difference between group 6-12 and 12-36.
Thanks for that. There's another question here for the section B, whether relating to the carbohydrates and the authorization of mono and disaccharides other than lactose. So we have maximum limits at 2.45 grams per 100 kcal. Is glucose syrup falling under that category of mono and disaccharides? Therefore, is it authorized to use in this, as long as it doesn't exceed then the 2.5? I think we need to check whether glucose syrup is really falling under the definition of mono and disaccharides. We'll come back to that in writing then. There's also another question on optional vitamins and minerals in the section B. So there is a ratio calcium phosphorus, and therefore for phosphorus, if we add calcium, how does it work? It seems impossible to aim for the questions. It seems impossible to aim for a high calcium content, because calcium can go up to 280 milligrams per 100 kcal and phosphorus to 100. So the ratio is questioned here. Maybe we should highlight this better in the Q&A.
Yes, we will have to look at that carefully, but if I'm correct, calcium is one of the mandatory minerals that we have for the part B. So for me, this is the first requirement that we will have to follow. Then indeed for the ratio, we have to go back to the text and read that carefully to be sure that we'll give the right answer.
Mm-hmm. There is a question also, yeah, we have answered that one. In the case for hydrolyzed proteins in formula and the products for young children, is it necessary always to have a clinical study that demonstrates their safety and suitability? This is indeed in line with the footnote. And should we always have that clinical study available if we want to use hydrolyzed proteins? I believe this is a question that would go for then the low energy to 1.6 grams instead of the 1.8.
So I can answer the question. So if you look carefully at the Codex text, yes, it is mentioned that any formula which is based on protein hydrolysate should be evaluated for their safety and suitability. So it does not mean that any recipe formula containing protein hydrolysate should be safe and suitable for the target population. So if you would have a formula for all the infants, yes, you have to have a data for all the infants. And then if you have a formula for young children, as an optional ingredients, because that would be optional ingredients, you have to have also safety and suitability demonstrated for that target group.
Good. There was another question. I'll take the last question, I think, now, because I see that most of the questions have been answered. There were quite a lot of questions on this macronutrient balance between proteins and carbohydrates. So I think we have tackled that one. The last question is that the rationale for the revised permitted limit of flavors. So it's a question, I suppose it's maybe to reiterate what we mentioned around the justification to have some flavorings permitted in the section B.
Yes, so I think it's what I tried to explain previously. For the part B, it was really discussed that the young children will be really exposed to different products and different flavorings and different tastes, because at this age, after 1 year old, they will begin to eat some family food as well, some general food. And then in this context, it was not needed to limit the use of flavoring. But for part A, as described by Violetta, these products are considered as breast milk substitute, and in this context, it was considered that it's not needed to have any flavorings permitted for these product categories. And I don't know if the question was about as well the fact that the maximum limit for 18 vanillin and vanillin was changed, and in fact for this modification, it was to be sure that everything that we will have in this Codex standard will be fully aligned with what we have in the standardized maximum limits expression for flavors that are managed in other standards, and to have for all of them the same expressions, the same units for these two potential flavorings.
I see there are more questions. I think there's also quite an interesting one, whether this revision of the standard here will lead to a revision of the standard 72 from 1981, which covers infant formula. I think that's a difficult question, which we as ISDI cannot answer, but unless Xavier, you wanted to ask.
No, if I may, I would flag that actually this standard has been revised in the history of Codex very recently, in the time frame of Codex, and we have certainly in CCNFSDU a discussion on the priority, but the expectation would be that other standards covered by CCNFSDU might take the precedent, because again, this standard on infant formula has been revised very recently in Codex terms.
All right. Well, I think, yeah, we have almost come to the end of our webinar, I think, and this I would like to we'll come. I'll see more questions coming in. I think we will reply to them in anyway individually. As I mentioned, we wanted to have this today, the launch of our guidance. Of course, any comments are welcome. We can, as ISDI, we are available for any question that you may have in reading it through. So I wish really to thank you, all of you, for having participated today. I think there were good questions and shows the contentious points. And of course, when we discuss things, sometimes we have more questions than always answers. So, but again, we'll take the time to answer them. And so I wish to thank, of course, Steve, who kindly provided the opening remarks, and of course, my panelists of the day, Xavier, Marie-France, Ray, Violetta. Thanks again for your time and dedication. And now, I think now that the revised standard is being published, I understand that yesterday the Arabic translation is now publicly available on the Codex website. So translations are going on. And this is a new chapter here in the implementation of the standard starting. But with this, we can close the webinar, and wish you a very good day or night. And I'll see you soon. Thank you.